Hello, lovelies. You're listening to episode 23 of the Broken Enchantments podcast. Written and read by Elizabeth Wheatley. That's me. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I would love to connect with you on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can check out the links below. Now let's get to the story. Janir was shown to a room on the second level with a window overlooking the main courtyard. It was not as spacious as her chambers back home in Greenhaven, but it was warm, clean, and dry. She wasn't going to complain. Armandius stayed until he was sure that she would be looked after. The maidservant attending Janir gave her a borrowed nightgown and said that she would be happy to help if Janir needed anything else during the night. But the maidservant's covert scowl made that seem like a challenge, as if the woman was daring Janir to just try disturbing her again before dawn. For the first time in months, Janir slept in a real bed and under a roof instead of a sky and on the hard ground. Within moments, she was dreaming. Janir awoke to the sound of soldiers doing drills in the courtyard below. She had overslept a good deal. Her breakfast of assorted fruits with bread and a jar of buttermilk had been left on her nightstand. When Janir made to rise, she groaned and flopped back into the bed. Every inch of her was sore. The days of relentless traveling would be taking their toll on her muscles for some time. Though it was akin to an ordeal, Janir hoisted herself up and limped to where the maidservant had laid out borrowed clothes for the day. She pulled the stiff surcoat over a chemise and did her best to make her hair look less unkempt in front of a brass mirror in the wardrobe. While Janir soaked her bread in buttermilk, there came a knock at the door. She would normally have opened it, but she was too sore to cross the room comfortably. She did the unladylike thing and shouted, "Come in." She smiled as Armandius made his way to a chair across from her near the window, adjusting his enchanted sword, the third, as he sat down. At least, people said it was enchanted. No one was quite sure how or for what purpose. Janir thought she felt something from it. There seemed to be a soft glow of enchantment settled over the blade, but she couldn't be sure. He watched her for a moment, the joy of last night replaced with concern. Janir waited for him to speak. It never did any good to press him while he was still organizing his thoughts. "Jenny, I need you to tell me what happened," Armandius began. "From the time I saw you off until last night." Janir swallowed. There was a heaviness in his voice that made her uneasy. "Not all of it is nice." "I know." Armandius reached over and lightly brushed her chin. "And I'm sorry, my child. Seovan skimmed over a few of the details last night." "You kept him awake?" Janir was struck by a sudden sense of indignation. "He's been in the saddle as long as I have. He deserved a few hours of sleep before dawn." Armandius watched her carefully. "He volunteered. He knows as well as I that it would be best that I know everything before the High Lords question you." "High Lords? Question me?" A shadow fell across his features. "Yes, but don't be frightened, my child. I will be there, and if even half of what I have been hearing is true, you have already met dangers 10 times greater than all of them combined. But it is best I know everything. So, start at the beginning." Drawing a deep breath, she began. "The morning after I left Greenhaven because of, well, you know that part, I met Carl. He was strung up in a tree." Armandius's eyebrows rose. A tree. For the first time, something other than gravity overcame him. Janir nodded in confirmation. "He mouthed off to the wrong people, apparently. Anyway, that evening he started talking about an enchanted artifact. The Key of Automatons." "You stayed with him?" "Well, yes. I couldn't just leave him in the wilderness on his own, could I?" "I mean, you've met him." Janir shrugged awkwardly. Armandius let the matter drop. "Go on." She told him of being found by Seovan and then separating, of the Mazag and being captured by her brother, giving as honest an account as she could remember. When it came time to speak of the Vermilion Market and the death of young Florite, the seeress's daughter not yet in her teens, Janir's careful composure cracked. She batted rogue tears from her eyes and tried to collect herself. "It was no fault of yours," Armandius said quietly. Janir sniffed and nodded. "I know, but—" She sighed. After giving her a moment, Armandius prompted her to keep on with her story. Janir recounted how Seavan had been captured. She couldn't keep a straight face or look Armandius in the eye when she told him about the Argotolum who had tried to force himself on her, in as little detail as possible. She only mentioned it because she was sure Seavan had. Janir skimmed over the part where she had been thrown in the crystal chamber. She didn't quite understand what had happened herself, but somehow the magic in that chamber had become a part of her. Once she finished her story, Armandius didn't speak for a while. "Jenny, there's something else we must discuss." "I'm listening." Janir recognized his bad news voice. She'd heard it usually when he had to leave on urgent business. Armandius drew a deep breath, hesitated, then continued. "We have to talk about the possibility that Lucan will make it back to Adasha, and that he will tell the Lord Argotolum of you." That thought had not entered Janir's mind. Would Lucan tell their father? Would their father try to get her back? "I don't think he would tell my father. Not willingly." "Why not?" "Because—" Again, Janir wished that she didn't have to tell Armandius what she was about to tell him. "Because so long as I am dead—" Janir trailed off. "What?" "Because Lucan is younger than me. By only 3 hours, but that is enough to make me—" Janir swallowed, desperately wishing there was a way to explain to Armandius without telling him. "To make me the Lord Argotolum's heiress over Lucan." "The seat of power often skips an heir," Armandius commented. "Among any race." "Not among Argotolums." Janir gulped. "Why not?" "Because—" Again, Janir wished that she didn't have to tell Armandius what she was about to tell him. "Because so long as I am dead—" In the now nearly 8 years Janir had lived as Armandius's daughter, she couldn't recall one time when they had discussed her Argotolum kindred. It was a subject that made both of them uncomfortable. It's been a long time, but I remember there is something very important about the presiding Argotolum having to be the true heir." "Why?" "Like I said, I don't remember the specifics, but Lucan can only be the true heir if I'm dead." The words slipped out before she had even processed them. What if Lucan told his mother she was alive? Bryson would doubtless send assassins. Would they know where to find her? Janir couldn't remember if she had ever told Lucan about Armandius or not. Kneading her hands together, Janir suddenly realized just how real the possibility was. "Father, what if they send people for me?" She shuddered. She didn't look up, but knotted her fingers together tighter and tighter. Armandius placed his hand under her chin and raised her gaze to meet his. "I'll kill them." "I don't care who they may send after you, I'll kill them." There was no reassurance, no patronizing undertone to his words. He was simply making a statement. "You know I would, don't you?" Janir had no doubts that Armandius would kill or die for her if the need arose. He couldn't have loved her any more if she had been his daughter. But she didn't want anyone hurt because of her, even the people who wanted her dead. Armandius slowly drew his hand away. "You shouldn't be called upon to appear before the court until sometime tomorrow evening. Such is the High King's schedule." Janir's foster father sighed, and then a mirthless smile spread over his face. "Kings have a singular talent for losing our grave and life-changing matters in a mountain of papers." He was trying to show humor. That was a good sign. "Can't the king just see me?" A crestfallen look befell Armandius. "I'm afraid not, my child. Every one of the ruling houses demands to have a say in your fate. No, don't worry. We will be returning home in time for the harvest celebrations. It is merely a formality." The maiden still didn't like the sound of it. "They all know of me? Just them or everyone?" "Only the High Lords. We have kept it secret to prevent complications with the people. And none of them would dare make an enemy of me, Janir. I'm far too dangerous for that." But they practically arrested you when they learned of me. They brought you here in chains. Janir had heard that much from what information Seovan had managed to glean from gossips on their way here. True, but I also let them. Armandius was grave as a tombstone. I won't let anyone hurt you, Janir. You know that. Janir swallowed. I know. You don't believe me? No, I do. I truly do. But if the Lord Argatalam wants me back, and if the High Lords want me gone... She shook her head. I don't... Janir wasn't sure how to say it. I don't want you to be caught between them. Janir looked away from him. She wasn't sure what it would mean either way. She rose, though it strained countless muscles, and pushed aside the thick drapes of her window. In the courtyard below, soldiers carried on with their drills, the frustrated shouts of their sergeants ringing out ever so faint above the tramp of dozens of boots. Janir. Armandius stepped up behind her. I've never spoken of this to anyone before. He sighed and shuffled his feet, showing more uncertainty than she'd ever seen. Janir, when I thought your mother had been killed, it destroyed me. I didn't care if I lived or died, so long as I killed as many of the Slavish and Argatalams as I could. At the time, I still had a living cousin to be my heir, and so none of the other High Lords tried to rein me in. I think most of them thought it best that I get myself killed and have it done with. Janir had often overheard some of the older staff back home speak of Armandius going through a reckless phase, a time full of drunken nights and foolhardy campaigns, when many had feared he was attempting to end his life. Yet the man they spoke of was so far from the one who had raised her. Janir had always thought it exaggeration or outright lie. In the 10 years after your mother's abduction, I developed an earned reputation as a ruthless bastard, I'm sorry to say. Armandius paused. Janir heard him shift behind her. Even after my cousin died of the fever, I couldn't be convinced to stop being what I had become. I did many things, cruel things that I should never have done, and would never have done while your mother was in my life. Janir had never wanted to think about what Armandius had done in wars. It frightened her too much. Velasquez was one of the few friends who never forsook me. But even he grew impatient eventually. Then I found myself responsible for you. The child of the woman who was so much more than my wife. Armandius gently pulled Janir around to face him. Your mother was my heart, my home, my... Armandius cleared his throat. My precious, precious child. I could no more forsake you than I could carve out my own heart. Janir wrapped her arms around his solid waist. He embraced her in turn, clutching her as if he were afraid she might disappear. Armandius' voice cracked. You saved me, Jenny. There's nothing I wouldn't do for you. I love you, Janir murmured, not sure what else to say. And there's nothing for me to forgive. There came a rapping at the door. Armandius kissed the top of her head before answering the knock. From her angle, Janir couldn't see who it was on the other side of the door, but judging how far Armandius was looking down, she guessed that it was a page. Tell him that I shall be there within the quarter hour, Armandius said in response to the messenger. There came a muted sound of acknowledgement from the page. Closing the door, Armandius turned to Janir. Some business with my steward here. Steward seemed to involve a lot of that. Janir thought it was a drastic change of topic from a moment ago, but she couldn't say she was wholly comfortable with the previous one. Her parents weren't something she had often discussed with Armandius. They do. Armandius glanced off to the side, suddenly awkward. But they normally deal with far more business than they create. Stay here for now. I probably won't be back until tomorrow. Janir nodded. It had often been like that, even at his private estate in Greenhaven. Armandius had been gone for weeks, on one occasion even months, at a time, seeing to one thing or other. Once more alone in her chamber, something occurred to Janir. What if one of the maids found her carcatan? Her rods remained under the pile of patched fabric that had served as her dress. Luckily, the chambermaid had not yet taken it away. Her carcatan were underneath, 2 black rods, each about the length of her forearm. When she had been 8, they were made and given to her by her father. As usual, when she held them, she heard them faintly whispering of courage and fighting and victory. It would have unsettled her had they not brought with them a sense of serenity, of rightness. Janir hid them on the topmost shelf in her wardrobe, behind a set of dusty embroidery hoops. She wouldn't be able to grab them quickly, but Janir thought she was relatively safe here. This has been the Broken Enchantments podcast. Thank you for listening. Check out my Patreon for early access to episodes, bonus content, and lots of patrons-only freebies. You can learn more at elizabethwheatley.com. And don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.